Evening all. Okay, I thought this week could have a look at the Bronstein Memorial. So if you've been following the channel, there have been some videos recently on David Bronstein. We had a look at his greatest, some of his greatest sacrifices. Very dynamic player, and with the dynamic players, they do tend to play in a very sacrificial and often creative way. And I think in the Bronstein Memorial Tournament, there was a player who did very well in the tournament, Baadur Jobava, and we're going to have a look at some of his games. So Jobava, who's a 27-06 player, and I think he did, reflect some of the originality of David Bronstein. So let's have a look at his game against Boris Savchenko. So this was in round 5. So it kicked off with d4, Jobava playing white. Savchenko's 2-5-5-6. So we see knight f6, and I quite enjoy playing this move occasionally in blitz. Knight c3, it's like a reverse Shigorin idea. Well, if black played d5, it's kind of a reverse Shigorin. Black does play d5 now. So you might think, well, the pawn on c4 is the classical approach to the position. Why would you want a knight blocking in your c-pawn? Well, there's other perks of the knight here. Quick e4 sometimes. And sometimes white can play like this to try and play for e4 later. White for the moment plays bishop f4. Now black plays a6, as though b5 might be a nuisance to this knight at some point. e3. But also another point of this is to deprive the b5 square. c7 could actually be a target as well. So g6. Now a very aggressive move already at move 5. We see h4 from Baadur Jobava. h4, so how does black react to this? Well, black chose to ignore this aggression, just played bishop g7. And now white played as though it's some sort of blitz game, h5, and black took, and now an exchange sack this early on. Rook takes h5. So what does this exchange sacrifice do? Well, after queen takes h5, d5's under fire. We've fractured the pawn structure a bit. It's not that welcoming to castle king side now with bishop d3 in the air. So it sets black some practical problems here already, which would probably cause him to have to improvise straight from the opening. So d5 is the current issue. He protects d5 with c6. Knight f3, and white's got a nice dark square grip here and is able potentially to tease the bishop here as well, or to provoke some more weaknesses. We see h6, and now white castles queenside. So white's got development quite rapidly, whilst black has development issues and has moved a lot of pawns, and it seems fairly unsafe, impossible to castle kingside in fact, because the bishop takes h6 immediately. So what does black do? Well, knight d7, the knight looks as though it wants to come to f6. Queen drops back here, actually threatening to win black's queen with the threat bishop c7. So there's an immediate threat to deal with again here. Knight f8, and now we see bishop c7 anyway. Queen d7, bishop e2, knight e6, evicting the bishop at least, but blocking in the bishop here. Bishop e5. So one question, well, f6 with the king in the center is just asking for queen h5. So black actually, well, the knight's protecting the bishop. Black just ignored things with this bishop. It just played b5. Rook h1, and it looks as though this pressure on the h file might mean something pretty soon. But what exactly? f6, the bishop drops back. Knight g5. Knight e1. Where is the knight heading to? Well, actually c5 looks like a vulnerable square. Black has moved a lot of pawns here, and c5 is just an evident weakness in this position. black castles finally here. Knight d3, queen f5. Now bishop f4, which means that the g pawn is ready to roll if needed. So pressure building up here. a5, knight c5, queen h7, and now g4. Pardon me, g4. So if we look at this position, there seems to be ample compensation for being the exchange down. In that it looks to be a very hemmed in position, and if this bishop moves, that maybe f4 in the future, or bishop d3 is going to be useful, and that g4 covers f5. Queen g6, and now bishop c7 is played. b4. Now this knight goes to a4. Look at this dark square grip that white has in this position. It's quite impressive. Black plays now e5. Now knight b6 hitting the rook. Rook a7. Bishop d6 hitting the other one. Rook moves. f4. Is white gaining more space here? Or trying to open lines? Well, actually white has the bishop attacked in this position, and despite that plays a very interesting move here. Plays actually g5. So what's going on here, you might ask? Well, let's see. The question is answered because black does take on d6, bishop h5, skewing queen against the rook, but you might think, well, it's protected by the knight. Does that matter? So queen f5. White doesn't take immediately the rook. White takes on h6 though. This pawn is quite nasty. And black reacts now, just moving the rook. So it's like a double exchange sack in effect. Because now that's like sacking the exchange. White's only getting a bishop back. So two exchanges down. But the pieces seem very impressive here. For white, and this pawn exceptionally dangerous actually. So black actually took the pawn with the rook. F takes, f takes. Now knight takes c8, and there's a very neat move coming up after knight takes c8. I wonder if you can guess it. So white played a very powerful move. Can you guess it? So if I give you 20 seconds here, what would you play in this position? So 20 seconds starting from now. Sorry, why did I say there was two exchange sets? There was only one exchange set earlier. So white to play here. What would you play with white? So white to play in this position. Can you spot something quite good? Okay. Black's king safety has been compromised, and this knight on c5 could actually be quite handy. It's gripping a couple of squares. There's been a suggestion for bishop e8 and some of you bishop f7, but actually it was bishop g6 that was played, attacking the queen. Now if rook takes, which wasn't played, I suspect check here looks pretty dangerous. Because the knight is covering that key escape square, and so black would be forced to give up the rook. So the queen actually took. Now there's still this check, and now the f file is used with rook f1 check, and this knight is really helping in the attack. It's an attacking piece, because unless black wants to give up the queen, this looks pretty bad. This checkmate here. The knight is covering these squares. So actually black resigned here, he's dropping this knight in any case if queen f6. I think at minimum we can just take the queen and just take here. It doesn't matter about the check. We've got king d2. So I thought that was a very exciting game, and showing you don't really need to know tons of theory to play effectively, even against a 25-50. So this is a very original approach to the opening, and just an exchange sack which seems on intuitive grounds very interesting indeed. All these dark squares counted for something when the knight came to c5 actually. So if we just quickly have a look at this again, this c5 square is just asking for a knight maneuver to it at some point, and the knight's now coming to that square potentially, and reaches it, and black hasn't got too many interesting options here. Okay, trying to play energetically. Now this rook, both rooks are attacked, and we saw this g5. So this is the start of a brilliant idea to sack the bishop temporarily. But black, instead of moving here, I think this would lead to other problems. If black had done bishop h8, for example, this is interesting as well. Maybe taking, or h7 check, maybe taking and h7 check looks a little bit on the dangerous side, or just f takes and then rook g1. It all looks actually pretty dangerous. Maybe just rook g1 so that g7 is controlled by the pawn, and then something like queen g2 for example. And you can see the knights are really actually kind of helping here, but also whites can even just consider taking here at any point. So anyway, for whatever reason, it looks as though black felt the best was not to do this, but to actually give back the piece. But white's pressure down this h file really is the source of a combination here with bishop g6. So I think that was a very exciting game by Jobava. Now let's have a look at another one of his games. Now this time he's up against the much higher rated player, well a little bit higher, pardon me, 2642, and he's playing with the black pieces against the 2642 Igor Kovalenko. So let's have a look at this game. So d4 from Igor. So Jobava actually plays something which was very popular in the days of Mikhail Tal, the Benoni defense, but without d6 here or e6, just g6, so a delayed e6. So knight c3, bishop g7. So this structure goes into, it looks like Benoni territory without d6 having been played yet again. Off the check, now d6, so it looks like a Benoni position. Or is it? Usually the white pawns are here and here, they're not like this. So black has got a structure which has an advantage in the normal Benoni with pawns like this. Often this knight is coming to c4, but it's held by the pawn, that square, and that will put pressure on d6. So you could argue, although black hasn't got a target on the e file, d6 might not be as sensitive, at least to a knight maneuver like that in conjunction with bishop f4. Is there less concern about d6 here, the way it was played? Now white castles, knight bd7, bishop f4, eyeing d6, and then we see knight f8, which doesn't just protect the pawn like this. This knight can show some aggression here with h6, g5 and knight g6, which would help control dark squares in the position, and we're going to see that. Knight d2, h6. So black's going for it on the dark squares, rook e1, and now actually bishop f5, preventing any bishop d3 from white for a moment. Queen b3, looking at b7. Is that a problem? Not really. At the moment, if this is taken, then it looks as though just rook b8 to take b2 is okay. So bishop f3, rook e7 now is played. Rook e2, bishop d3, rook drops back. Now knight h4. This knight, which was protecting d6 at some point, has got very aggressive recently, like this. Very, very aggressive knight. Rook ad1. Now queen e8, putting a battery for a moment, eyeing e1. White takes, queen takes. Queen b6, putting d6 under scrutiny. Black plays a passive looking move, rook d8. But on the other hand, he controls the e file now. This must be worth something to have this possession of the e file. King h1. Now black gives up that aggressive knight to weaken white on the light squares a bit. And this knight, if it takes, is going to lose c4. But if he takes with this structure looks a wreck. So it's lesser evil time. It does take giving up the c4 pawn. But is the bishop blocked in? Was this a trap? b3. Where's the bishop going? If the bishop goes to e2, then surely rook e1 is pinning the bishop to the queen. Well, okay. Black in this position has resources though. And counterattacks one of white's pieces with g4. So some questions arise here. Now, if the knight goes to d2, then the bishop can use d3 to hop back into safety. So actually white plays hg. Knight takes g4 now, unleashing another attack on the knight here, as well as the pawn. This seems to have backfired for black, tactically, for white tactically. What is white doing in this position? What was a simple task of trying to win this bishop, now lots of things are being attacked. He protects f2 and accepts the loss of a pawn basically after bishop takes. B takes, with black a pawn up now. White still has pressure bearing on d6 though. Bishop f6. That also stops bishop h4s, which could have been annoying perhaps. Rook e1, but white is gaining possession back of the e file. Queen d7. a5. Also the bishop means the rook's protected, so the queen's actually free to roam a bit more. h5. Rook b1. Now this pressure on the queen side does give white compensatory pressure, you'd think. Queen f5 is played. And for a moment here, does it look as though queen takes b7? I think black would have sufficient play here on queen takes b7. He doesn't actually play that. He plays actually king g1, and now we see king g7, still offering b7. Maybe it's this, there's certain invasory points about this position. So white stays guard of these squares, d3 and c2 to the queen, and keeps protecting the rook of course. But rook e8, queen d1. Now we see bishop c3, but isn't white able to take here? He does. So materially, what's the state of affairs? In fact, it looks as though d6 is now attacked as well, because the king is now protecting f2. The queen drops back, protecting d6. Bishop h4, queen f4. Perhaps white could have repeated here, but he plays instead queen b1. So actually white, from being a pawn down, there's a pawn up here, has a rook on the 7th rank. It seems fairly interesting, But now comes a very, very interesting tactic indeed. Can you spot what black played in this position? So there's method to the madness of being a pawn down here for black. So if I give you 20 seconds in this position, black to play, what do you think he played? 20 seconds starting from now, black to play. Okay, it's a very, very dynamic move, and I must admit it's easier when going over games to encourage thinking about dynamic moves, but in our own games we often stop at points where we're losing material or gaining material, but those are just starting points for investigation. And here black could actually sacrifice an entire rook with rook e1 check. So knight takes e1 is forced, otherwise white's losing the queen. And the point is here it's an exchange sack in the short run after check. Queen takes h4, so exchange sack, but black is now threatening queen f2. How does white defend this? And it was also a horrible queen h1. So white defends f2 with knight d3. But now after the check here, white is losing the g2 pawn. And funny enough, in this position, didn't like his position much, it seemed. Either that, or he ran out of time. White actually seems to have resigned here or ran out of time. Let's have a quick look why. This pawn looks, if it's given some time, it'll be very dangerous. Can't white do anything? What if white played queen f1? I think here queen e4 check actually, and the bishop's controlling some key squares. I mean, this looks dangerous for a start. If here, maybe just queen takes c4, for example, and white seems to be falling apart at the seams. The center or queen a4, this looks horrible. So I don't know, white may have lost on time or resigned. A very interesting game, how black was a pawn up, then pawn down, then this exchange sack. So an intriguing game using the Benoni system, but with a different kind of emphasis on the pawn structure. With this, by playing for e6, well, it was white's decision not to take like this, which would be the classic Benoni structure. But maybe here there was a concern about the quick pressure on the e pawn. Possibly there's something peculiar about this position, like knight takes e4, because there might be a quick f5. But for whatever reason, white took with a different structure, which is in some ways helps the d6 pawn. So when we have this pawn on d6 later, there's no knight to c4 maneuver. And I think black's strategy here with the knight was kind of cute, actually, to play h6 and g5. Very aggressive stuff. It weakens a few light squares, but you've got to sort of pay the price of something usually in chess to get something else. Yeah, this was interesting. This knight, when it came to h4, now it looked as though this is very interesting. Although this was attacking d6, it did neglect c4, and now this constant threat of taking here and taking here exists. And so black had won a pawn and then had to play energetically after to avoid losing the bishop. So actually still a pawn up, and then white controlled the e file and then the b file pressure. And the thing is, I think what black has done is again got possession of this e file, and although a pawn down here, this is a very interesting position where this tactic happened, this rook e1. I think by white actually playing bishop h4, the kind of weakness of this diagonal was exposed, that the knight's kind of able to be distracted as well from h2. So maybe white's really kind of slipped up a bit, allowing this. So he won with black against the 2-6-4-2 Jobava in that round. So that was in round 6. Now let's go on to the very first round, and I was really intrigued by the opening choice. I think Bronstein, the improviser, would have been impressed. So playing white against Elena Zade, a 2-4-2-3, e5, knight f3, knight c6, and guess what? What move have you never ever considered here which might be okay in this position if I gave you 20 seconds starting from now? So this looks like a familiar position. There's a move which, when I've seen this game, I wondered, why did I bother learning about the Ruy Lopez when there's something else you can do if you want to avoid theory here? So what would be a surprise move which isn't too bad? There's a number of moves actually, but the most common, and it's not bishop c4 and it's not bishop b5, but there's another move which is intriguing. I'll have to show you actually, because it's bishop e2. I think it's called the Taylor opening according to chessgames.com. Taylor opening, bishop e2. Now bishop d3 might, I don't know if bishop d3 might be okay. That looks as though this might be interesting as well. I don't know if black can really punish bishop d3 either. Maybe with, it looks as though d5, but anyway, bishop e2 was the one I was after. Is black improvising? That's the interesting thing. Black played what seems to be a logical idea just to try and emphasize control of d4. Black played g6, so I assume it's a she trying to exert more pressure on d4, and white's trying to play for constructing the center. So d4, d6, knight a3 though, as though the knight is going to put more pressure on the structure here. Knight f6, d takes e5. And things look a bit strange already after d takes e5. If d takes e5, it looks as though this is annoying, because what about the e5? We don't really want this, surely. White could even castle queenside. Looks horrendous. So black played knight takes e4. Queen d5. This looks just a very strange position now, where white's achieved something which looks better than a lot of Ruy Lopez positions that you would get, especially if black's having to improvise. Then black's out of opening theory. f5 doesn't look good in principle, weakening the diagonal. Looks horrendous, to be honest. E takes d6, knight takes d6. I think actually if queen takes d6, we might even have knight b5, and I haven't engine checked this, but this would be neat. If takes, we can take here, check, get the queen back with a pawn. So we see actually knight takes d6, bishop g5, gaining another tempo, more development. The The queen drops back. Black can't even castle. Bishop d7. White castles queenside. What a fantastic position to have with white. Now knight b5. Knight e4. Bishop's attacked. Black's prompting bishop e7, but white played probably a more annoying move to face. Bishop f4, eyeing c7. Now black felt compelled to give up the light square bishop. Bishop takes b5, c6. So black is extra weak now on the light squares in the position. And white here just celebrates f7 with knight g5, eyeing f7. Now, you might think, well, knight takes g5 is asking to be butchered, surely, after bishop takes. Here, we just play this. What is black really doing in this position? It looks horrible. Bishop f6, you've got to be kidding. There's queen anything after that. So actually, black played rook f8, which it all looks wrong, the opening here for black now. Knight e6. On g7 here, rook f7. Check, king f8, and then the bishop drops back, hitting the rook. Knight d5. White is winning a pawn with this defense of knight d5. C takes, bishop takes, so white's won a pawn. Rook d7. And this is just so good positionally. Bishop e6. And it looks as though, has white gone a bit wrong here? Hold on a sec. Has white fallen into something with bishop e6? There's knight c5. Ouch, you might think. This could be a bit embarrassing. Surely, because, for example, this wasn't played, but if queen c4, then knight takes, queen takes, rook takes, and we're losing the queen. Oh dear. No. White, in this position, plays a different move. Can you guess what white played here? If I give you 20 seconds starting from now, white to play. So what does white play, do you reckon? Alright, I assume actually the move queen b4 is quite good. I can't find objection to queen b4. So if you said that, well, yeah, but black could maybe wriggle out, you know, taking this, and probably most of the problems are solved. And also consider black has rook c8. So if that was an end point of your analysis and you thought that was good enough, then you're not asking for much. Rook takes d7 was played, just sacrificing the queen. And if this was the end point of your analysis, then that's a good start point for investigating how much fun you can have with this position after the queen sack, which wasn't played, because black actually resigned here. So why did black resign? Well, let's have a quick look. So knight takes b3 is check. I presume we want to leave the bishop here, protecting the rook. So a takes. I think this is lost for black, this position, basically. Two bishops and two rooks. where does the queen move? If queen, let's give queen c6 as an example. And I should have engine checked this, so this is embarrassing. But this does look lost. What does white want to play? I mean, maybe I think maybe just rook e1 looks strong, among other things. Because I don't think black's strapped for moves here. If we go with something like this, rook f7, we can't go there because of rook c7 check, and we can sort of at least win the queen and just be material up. I mean, that's just off the top of my head. Rook e1 just looks like you know, a winning idea, just to play rook f7 and try and win the queen. But yeah, I mean, it just shows, you know, if you're the fascination for me on a practical level, if you ever go and play like field-rated games and you spend the whole day, I mean, do you really want to play into someone's theory that they've spent months researching if you want to play bishop b5, when you look at some of these guys' games and he won the tournaments and he's played bishop e2 here? And so where does that leave the current state of opening theory? What is the value of opening theory when you can have fantastic, you know, positions at the opening? If you get your opponent to improvise, I think it's not so bad, but it does get the opponent to improvise. I'm not saying, you know, h4. I'm not saying a4. You know, these would be bad moves, but bishop e2 seems okay. It might not carry the aggression of bishop b5, but you know, it's okay. Right. Sorry, I just checked the audio. Okay. Let's go on to another game. So now in this game, round 3 that I'd like to show you, round 3 against Vanison, a 2-5-1-1-6. So Jobava was playing white and played c4, the English opening. So we see c6, and now instead of Slav, actually we get the option to make it look like a Caro-Kann, d5. And this is actually quite a good system against the Caro-Kann, because sometimes it's annoying to, you know, take a pawn in the center and try and hold on to it. Annoying for black. C takes, e takes, knight f6. White plays a check here to disrupt black's position a little bit and hold on to the pawn. Try and hold on to this pawn. Okay, so g6, knight f3, and white constructs a position where he's holding on to the pawn, but for the moment with d3 also holding on to the bishop, just in case that c file later is going to make the bishop a bit loose. Here b5 looks to be threatened, because after taking we've got knight b6 protecting the rook and attacking the queen. So b5 does seem to be a threat. The queen just sidesteps here with queen a3. So here we can, I think, just take now, if that was the case. Knight b6, and this shows that the pawn on d3 is quite handy here. The bishop doesn't need to move or anything, and white can actually go back to b3. Knight bd7. Now it looks as though b5 is now again a threat, and that's suppressed. a4, b6. So black, I don't know if black's annoyed. He hasn't got his pawn back. What compensation has he got? d4 cutting the knights out of c5 and e5. Bishop b7. White's a pawn up. White's a 25-16. He seems to be a pawn down for nothing much. But there is a nice blockade square, and these are double pawns. So can this blockade square give some counterplay for black? Knight e8, rook e1, knight d6. On the other hand, e7 is the next subject of attack, potentially. Bishop d3, knight f6, knight e5, and also it looks as though knight c6 could be handy. Rook e8, bishop g5, h6, bishop drops back, rook c8, h3. Now black tries to create some counterplay. I think it's just a very, very annoying position to have with black here. He can't even move this knight. I mean, white would just snap that off. This is horrendous, surely. Where does the queen want to go? I mean, so he plays b5, trying to sort of unbind himself. A takes. And white doesn't want to sort of lose d5 here. White plays knight c6. And there's a nasty skewer of rooks, potentially, with bishop d6 leading that. Well, let's see. Black, in this position, moved the queen. If he took... maybe just taking... And I mean, here it looks as though maybe we just take with the knight, and we've undoubled the pawns. Maybe this is good enough. So anyway, black played queen d7, and we have this pawn dropping off now. Bishop takes d6, and then bishop takes b5. So 2 pawns up for the moment. Knight takes d5. Trying to undermine tactically the c6 knight. But the c6 knight moves to attack the bishop. Knight takes... and there's also an attack on the rook here. Knight takes c3. Bishop takes e8. Is white going to be the exchange up? Because if black ordinarily captured now, white would have just won the exchange. Black plays bishop d5. And here we get a nice tactical move, it seems, queen a3. It actually prevents, I mean, rook e8, because we just take here and we've got this pin. So black does seem to be losing material. He takes. Still doesn't want to be the exchange down. Can't simply just take this. Knight e4. Well, he is the exchange down now. White has 2 rooks, bishop and knights. But black's the exchange down after all that. The thing is, interestingly, I think if the bishop goes out here, then maybe rook c2 with some potential nuisance value, because also there's bishop takes d4, and this might be some sort of counterattack. White perhaps didn't want to do that. He actually played rook a e3, showing, you know, give back the exchange, but just be a pawn up instead. Black didn't want anything to do with rook takes e8 here. I don't think this position offers too much counterplay for black. So black actually just supported the knight with f5. But it does drop g6, more material loss. e6. At least d4 is under fire. But now white plays f3. Knight drops back. Knight b3 protecting d4. Rook b8. And now exchange sack time. Rook takes e6, hitting the knight here. Bishop takes, rook takes, knight c4, check. So all the counterplay is being removed from black, and he finds himself 2 pawns down without much going on, with the knight actually still holding d4. f4, knight d3, that's supported. g3, knight b4, bishop d7, white's going to win another pawn. King f7, white wins another pawn. Bit of a nightmare game. It seems as though black wasn't given any glimpse of counterplay. White was ready to carry on playing dynamically, offering back the exchange and stuff. So he's just several pawns up, 3 pawns up. And here black resigned. So a very controlled game, I think, this one, in standard opening theory of the Caro-Kann. Let's have a quick check again. So white, with this queen a4 check, started causing some severe problems for d5. Queen a3 is a very nifty idea. So black's been kind of hoodwinked into being a pawn down for not much. I think here, knight c6, yeah, doesn't look too hot for black. So I think his idea, black's idea, was to try and just sack the exchange, but white wasn't having it. White was sacking the exchange here. I mean, he doesn't want to lose d4. There wasn't much choice. He doesn't want to lose d4. That would be bad. So rook takes e6. And he just transposed it into just being several pawns up without fuss. So a neat game. Let's have a look at another. So now in round 7 against Daniel Dubov. Actually, the last game I want to show you this. This is the last one I would like to show you. So let's have a quick look at this. So a 2-6-1-4 in round 7. And he kicks off with b3. So again, innovative opening against the 2600 opponent. Nimzo Larsen attack. So bishop b2, knight c6, e3. Now g6, and guess what? h4. It's as though it's like he's having a good time in this tournament. He's not just playing chess professionally. He's having a great time with his openings. So black actually played h5, knight f3, bishop g7. I think this would be ideal, this kind of opening, for blitz chess, and I think that's why Nakamura often plays b3 in blitz chess. But you know, maybe it's okay, you know, even in longer games. But with c4, okay, white's controlling some key central squares as well. d6, d3. Knight g7. It looks a little bit like an English opening now. So queen c2, rook b8, bishop e2. Nothing wrong with, there doesn't seem to be anything wrong with white's position. Bishop g4, knight e4, queen d7, and white castles queenside. b5, trying to expose, trying to send some cold winds to white's king, opening up some lines. White actually takes this. Rook takes b5, but now, you know, central control, d4, central pressure with d4, and with the queen on the same file as the rook. What does black do here? We see rook b6, and this goes nicely, unfortunately for black, into white's next move, this rook b6. Can you see what white actually played in this position, which might have been a bit of a shocker for black? So white's very alert to these tactical opportunities. So if I gave you 20 seconds here, what would you play with white? Any ideas? Okay. Now, if you had said D takes E, I mean, that looks as though it might be reasonable. Possibly, black can possibly take on F3 and then take on E5. I haven't really checked this, but no, it was a spectacular move. Knight C5, emphasizing that the rook's on B6. So if D takes, we're hitting the rook and the queen. So knight C5, the queen goes to F5, bishop D3, queen goes all the way back to C8. Now knight A4 hitting the rook again, poor rook, rook B8. What has white achieved though? Well, now comes D5. So if knight takes D5, I think that queen takes C6 is possible. So we've seen the knight going back. Bishop C4. White's got a nice grip on the centre, it seems. Nice grip on D5 here. C6, black's trying to undermine that. D takes. Queen takes. D5 has been compromised though. E4 marking out that D5 square. This structure looks as though that's a clear backward pawn, surely. Where is black's compensation for this structural concession? Knight B5, king B1, rook FC8, king A2, bishop E6, and we see rook C1. So white seems to have a nice position here. Is black going to liberate this or something? What is he planning to do? Well, bishop H6, knight G5, and has black got a forcing sequence which looks attractive? Bishop takes C4, queen takes C4, queen E8 hitting the queen and protecting F7. Now surely this knight is like pinned to the rook for the moment. Queen D3, and in fact F6 kind of says that. Isn't your knight like pinned to the rook? Interesting. I mean, maybe black had calculated this and thought, what's going on here? I don't think white is interested in giving up the C file here. With rook takes C8. Rook takes C8. I don't think that there's interest in this. White's got a different idea in mind totally here after this F6, which is really interesting. Really, really interesting. White actually played, well, it's a bit of a shocker actually. Can you guess what white plays in this position? If I give you 20 seconds starting from here, this is a very interesting move. So white to play, what would you play here? I think it's a case of asking more from the position than what normal sane analysis might offer. An annoying thing, I think, from white's perspective is that this bishop, you know, would love to have a party on this diagonal. Forget about the immediate threats. But white actually, so white actually plays. Oh dear, oh dear. White plays f4, believe it or not. Look, he's smashing down black's centre for this bishop. This bishop is going to be pretty good. You know, if takes here, we can take on f6. So black took the piece. Okay, so we get h takes g, preserving the pressure on e5. Bishop drops back. And the bishop drops back, actually, to f8. If the bishop had dropped back to g7, that's interesting. Maybe black had rejected this, just speculating, because of f5. It looks as though f6 is on the cards. Doesn't look too appetizing. So anyway, the bishop went back to f8, and after f takes, at least this bishop's going to be great on diagonal. D takes, bishop takes. Is this worth a piece though? Black took on c1, white took on c1. Well, we've got control of the c file now for a moment. That's contested. Now if rook takes, we're not winning this because knight takes. The queen is holding b5 for the moment. White plays knight c5 here, and this does mean that the c4 square is available for a check now. I think black started to go wrong. Well, it looks as though black may have gone wrong. Black played knight c6, which seems as though it's got some logic to attack the bishop. But it goes into an almighty pin now, knight d7. This pin here, white is actually threatening rook takes c6. Pardon me. White is threatening things like queen d5 check and picking up one of these knights, for example. Black tried knight takes e5, but now the check is good anyway. Why is the check good? I think, okay, I should have really checked this with engines. Now I'm starting to look bad, I think. After king h8, this wasn't played. Black played queen f7, but let's try and investigate. This is before move 40. This could have been an outright blunder. King h8. I don't know if we're mopping up pieces here. Let's give this a try. Rook takes c8, queen takes check, bishop g7. We don't want to be mated on c2, so I'm not really sure about this. Maybe don't think this is right. Alright, so answers here. So let's have a quick look at this position together. So has white got a really good position here? In the game, after queen d5 check, queen f7 was played, and the game promptly ended here and now in this position with queen takes f7 check. Okay, because if knight takes, we just take here, and we're also winning the bishop. And if king takes, I think just taking here, and we're winning the rook after, and that's good because we're actually attacking the bishop after, even if here rook takes attacking the bishop. So the game actually ended there after queen f7. So the interesting question here is, white is two pieces down. Is he still winning after king h8? So 20 seconds here. What would you play as white here? Actually, I think I've spotted a move. Yeah, I think there's a simple move here, which is good for white. I wonder if you can guess it as well. I believe there's a very strong move here. It's been mentioned. Sorry, it's been mentioned on Play Chess. Yeah, by Gagacats. Well done. Yeah, it looks pretty strong to me the more I look at it. So white's play here. What would you play here with white? Yeah, I wouldn't take the rook. I think if we take the rook, we're helping black get the queen to c2. I think just knight f6, because we're actually attacking the queen and threatening mate here. I think knight f6. I don't know what black does there. If queen f7, I think we can just take here. That looks attractive. We'll take the rook. I mean, taking here, rook takes, so we're attacking the bishop. If the king goes here, I think white's position is pretty strong. Although again, I missed something here. Does white take on f7 in this position or take the rook? If we take the rook and take the queen, yeah, got to be careful about this position. I think we can just. I think this one take the queen and then take the rook here. King g7. Yeah, something to engine check. I think. Sorry, what's Gagacats saying? First rook takes c8. He's saying actually first rook takes c8. So if we have queen takes d5, then what? If we take on oh dear. Oh, we take on d. We take e takes, knight takes. Anyway, so if you've got answers to that, yeah, it'll be on YouTube. So if you want to put some analysis for this position, that'd be great. The other option is also interesting, King g7, but I think this runs into taking here. This looks good, more easy to check out, maybe with the check. No, actually, which one? Oh, is it? No, this one needs to be investigated as well. We take on c8, queen takes, check. Oh, this does look dangerous. Maybe we can just do queen d5. I shouldn't have got involved in this. This is a bit technical. Sorry about that. Especially the last thing to look at this final position. But yeah, I'll put some analysis, technical analysis, when it goes on YouTube later. But the final position, it abruptly ended here. So that's pretty clear cut compared to what we've looked at. So anyway, this Jobava is pretty good. I hope you enjoyed checking out some of his games, his wins from this Bronstein Memorial. So okay, yeah, same time next week. Have a good week. Good luck with your chess. Thanks very much.